I still remember the night when the air itself felt alive, trembling like it feared what was coming. The jungle was whispering, the fire cracked low, and then everything went silent. Even the insects stopped. That's when I felt the ground move beneath my feet, slow and heavy, like something ancient was waking up after 1,000 years. I looked toward the river, and the water began to ripple, wider and faster until it exploded upward. Out of the darkness rose a shadow longer than 10 men, scales glistening under the moonlight, eyes glowing like molten gold. My breath froze. I had heard stories of it, the serpent that once ruled the world, the one that even death could not conquer. I thought they were lies, old tales to scare children. But that night I saw the truth. Titanoboa had returned, and it wasn't just hungry, it was angry. My name is Arik, born in a time when the earth itself breathed fire and fear. There were no cities, no walls, no mercy, only the raw heartbeat of nature pounding through every storm. The sky was thick with smoke, the air heavy with the scent of life and death. Every sound in the jungle could mean danger. Every shadow could hide a predator older than memory. We lived in constant motion, always hunting, always hiding, because the moment you stopped, something bigger would find you. But deep within the swamps, beyond the mist and the rotting trees, something else ruled, a creature no one dared to name. My people spoke of it in whispers, a ghost of the old world, a serpent so massive it could strangle the mountains themselves. I didn't believe them, not until the night I saw its shadow move, and realized the legends were never stories, they were warnings. The night after I saw its shadow, I couldn't sleep. The jungle felt different, heavier, like it was holding its breath. Even the wind that used to whistle through the trees had gone still, and every rustle in the dark felt like eyes watching. My tribe gathered near the fire, but no one spoke. The flames flickered weakly, as if scared to glow too bright. I could feel the unease in everyone's heartbeat, a rhythm that whispered one name, Titanoboa. We tried to believe it was gone, that maybe what I saw was just a trick of the moon, but deep down I knew better. At dawn we moved silently through the mist, the ground wet with last night's rain. The air was thick and sour, and even the birds refused to sing. I carried my spear close, my hands trembling not from the cold, but from the thought that something far greater than us was awake. We followed the trail of broken trees and crushed ferns leading to the riverbank. The smell hit us first, rotting flesh mixed with mud. There, half submerged in the water, lay the remains of a crocodile split open as if torn by a force too strong to imagine. The elders exchanged fearful glances, and I felt a strange pull in my chest, a mix of horror and fascination. Then came the sound, a deep, dragging motion, heavy and slow, like the earth itself shifting. The water rippled. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs locked. The ripples turned into waves, and the reflection of the moon shattered across the surface. Then it rose. The Titanoboa broke through the water in silence, its massive coils gliding upward, dripping with black mud and blood. Its scales shimmered like wet obsidian, each movement deliberate, calm, terrifyingly slow. Its eyes found me, golden and ancient, filled with something beyond hunger. In that moment I understood we weren't prey to it. We were trespassers in its kingdom. My heart pounded so loud I thought it would give me away. My brother whispered my name, telling me not to move, but his voice trembled and cracked halfway through. Titanoboa turned its head toward the sound, and before I could react, it struck. The water exploded around us, the sheer force knocking me back into the mud. I gasped, choking on dirty water, struggling to rise, but the scene before me froze my blood. The serpent had wrapped itself around my brother, its body coiling tighter and tighter until the sound of bones breaking filled the air. His scream echoed once, then vanished beneath the hiss of the beast. I wanted to run, to close my eyes, but something inside me refused. I couldn't look away. Titanoboa lifted its prey slowly, almost gently, before dragging him beneath the water's surface with a final, echoing splash. The jungle fell silent again, as if mourning what it had just witnessed. The water calmed, the moonlight returned, and only ripples remained, evidence of the monster that vanished beneath. I stood frozen, tears mixing with the mud on my face, my body trembling with rage and disbelief. The others pulled me back, whispering that it was over, that we had to leave before it returned, but my eyes stayed fixed on the river. I could still feel its presence, that quiet, unstoppable power beneath the surface. That night changed everything. Fear spread through the tribe like disease. No one dared go near the water again. We moved our camp higher up the cliffs, but sleep never came easy. Every sound carried the echo of that night. The splash, the scream, the silence. I blamed myself. If I hadn't followed the trail, if I had listened to the elders, maybe my brother would still be alive. But the truth is, I didn't just feel fear anymore. I felt something darker, something burning beneath the grief, a promise. I swore that if the beast ever returned, I would face it, no matter the cost. For nights, I sat awake staring at the river, waiting for another sign, another ripple in the dark. The elders said the serpent was a spirit of punishment, that those who challenged nature would always lose, but I couldn't accept that. I wasn't afraid of death anymore. I wanted vengeance. Each dawn brought the same mist, the same silence, but also the same thought haunting my mind. Titanoboa was still out there, watching, waiting, remembering. And when it came again, I would be ready, because monsters like that don't just vanish. They return for those who dared to look into their eyes and live to tell the story. I could feel the pulse of the jungle shift beneath me, a rhythm controlled entirely by the presence of Titanoboa. Its massive body moved through the water and reeds with a grace that was almost hypnotic, each coil perfectly calculated, each motion a silent declaration of power. I followed at a careful distance, barely breathing, knowing that a single misstep could be my last. The swamp was alive in a way I had never imagined, every creature reacting to the predator that reigned supreme, fleeing, hiding, or falling victim to its crushing strength. I watched as it wrapped around a giant crocodile, squeezing with such force that the air seemed to escape from the world itself, snapping bones and tearing flesh in a silent, horrifying display of dominance. The eyes of Titanoboa caught mine, amber fire reflecting in the water, and I could sense the intelligence behind those eyes, a knowing of its power and a contempt for any being that dared share its territory. Each day I observed it, learning its patterns, its patience, its merciless nature. I felt a mixture of terror and fascination that twisted in my stomach like a living thing. It wasn't hunting for food alone. It was claiming every corner of the swamp, sending a warning to every creature, living or imagined, that this was no longer a safe world. Nights became unbearable. The screams of unseen giants and the crashing of trees under immense weight filled the air, leaving my mind unable to rest. I started marking the trees, tracking its movements, learning to anticipate where it would strike. But even then, nothing could fully prepare me for the sudden eruption of power when it attacked. One evening, under a blood-red sunset, I saw it slither up a cliffside with a precision that defied its enormous size, crushing smaller predators in its path as if they were insignificant insects. I realized then that survival was only possible by understanding its dominance, by respecting the raw force of nature incarnate before me. I began to feel the weight of responsibility, that my knowledge and careful observation might not just save me, but my tribe, and perhaps even shape the way humans survived in this brutal, ancient world. Each encounter sharpened my senses. The smell of mud and blood, the sound of splintering wood, the shimmer of its scales in moonlight became ingrained in my memory like a survival guide written in terror and awe. I could feel its presence even when it was hidden beneath the water, a vibrating awareness that made the ground tremble faintly, warning me that it was always watching, always aware, always in control. Despite the fear, I began to cultivate a strange respect for it, recognizing that Titanoboa was more than a beast. It was a ruler, a force that embodied the raw, unstoppable power of the earth itself. I would sit by the riverbanks for hours, pretending to rest while studying every twitch, every ripple of water, every shift in the reeds, learning to predict its movements, to anticipate its strikes, even imagining what it might do next in the next moments of unimaginable power. The more I watched, the more I understood the delicate balance between predator and prey, and the importance of courage laced with intelligence. And yet, despite the terror and destruction it wrought, a spark of defiance grew inside me. I could not allow fear to consume me entirely. I could not let it be the final word in this world. I began to form plans, imagining how I might confront it, strike it, survive it, not out of foolish pride, but out of necessity, knowing that if I did not learn to face this force, my people would never walk safely again. Nights remained filled with screams and the sounds of collapsing trees, and I felt my own heartbeat in harmony with the chaos, a rhythm of determination rising alongside the terror, because I realized that the jungle would not forget. that the beast would not forgive, and that if I hoped to survive, I had to grow stronger, faster, smarter than I ever imagined possible. The world itself seemed to test me, each encounter more harrowing than the last, every shadow a challenge, every ripple a warning. But deep inside, I felt a growing clarity, a focus that cut through the fear. Titanoboa was no ordinary creature. It was a manifestation of ancient power, a judge of strength and spirit, and I knew that understanding it, surviving it, and eventually confronting it would define the next chapter of my life and that of my people. I could sense it everywhere, in the mist, in the water, in the trembling ground, a constant, looming presence that forced me to evolve, to push beyond instinct, to imagine strategies and courage beyond anything I had known. And as I watched it disappear into the shadows of the swamp one final time that evening, coiling and stretching like a living monument of terror and majesty, I made a vow to myself that I would not flee from the power that dominated this world, that I would face Titanoboa, understand it, and endure, because in this age, only those who dared to confront the impossible could hope to survive. And I, trembling yet resolute, was determined to be one of them. The swamp had claimed another night, leaving the jungle trembling and silent except for the distant echoes of snapping trees and unseen splashes, and we moved carefully through the mist, my tribe small, fragile, and constantly aware that every step could be our last. Fire was our only defense, a flickering barrier against the darkness. But even it felt inadequate against a predator that moved like a shadow given life, a serpent whose sheer size and cunning rendered every spark of flame almost meaningless. Each day we scavenged for food, and each night we returned to the caves with our hearts pounding, knowing that the river we depended on for water and fish was the same place where death waited silently, coiled and patient. The elders warned us repeatedly never to approach the water after dark, their voices low but sharp with fear, their eyes haunted by the knowledge of what could happen to the foolish or desperate. Hunger, however, does not heed warnings, and that night it forced my brother to make a choice we all feared. He could not let the tribe starve, and so he ventured alone toward the riverbank, torch in hand, eyes scanning the murky water for signs of fish or small game, his figure moving with the practiced grace of a skilled hunter. I followed at a distance, my heart threatening to burst from my chest, every instinct screaming at me to stop him, to pull him back to safety, but I knew the terrain and the shadows would betray me if I made a move too soon. He reached the water and knelt, dipping a crude net into the dark, trembling river, and for a moment everything seemed normal. The water lapping gently, the fog curling over the reeds, the night alive with the usual symphony of distant calls. Then the splash came, too heavy, too deliberate, and I saw the coils rise from the water like a living mountain, scales glistening in the dim moonlight, eyes glowing with a predatory intelligence that froze my blood. Titanoboa struck with a speed that belied its size, wrapping around him with a force that bent the very earth, lifting him from the ground as if he weighed nothing at all. I screamed, charging forward with a spear clutched in my trembling hands. But the swamp swallowed my shouts, the water churning violently as he struggled, the sound of cracking bones and tearing flesh filling the night in a way that would haunt me forever. My hands itched to reach him, to strike, but fear and awe paralyzed me. And by the time the serpent released him into the dark waters, he was gone, leaving only ripples and a silence more deafening than any scream. I fell to my knees at the edge of the river, soaked and shaking, tears mixing with the mud as the realization settled over me. Our strongest hunter, my brother, was gone, taken by a force beyond understanding or control. The tribe gathered around, faces pale and rigid, the weight of grief and terror pressing down on every chest, and I could see the fear in their eyes, a fear deeper than hunger or exhaustion, a fear that whispered we were not masters of this world, that the swamp and its ancient ruler held dominion over all living things. Night after night I watched the river from the cliffs above, my heart heavy with loss and a growing anger that burned hotter than the fires we carried. And I began to plan, to think, to imagine ways to survive, to strike, to reclaim even a sliver of power against a creature that had proven it could snuff out life without hesitation. I traced its path in the mud, studied the trees it flattened, the water it churned, the creatures that fled before it, and in that study, I found a fragile sense of control, a way to measure my fear and transform it into strategy. The loss of my brother was a wound that would not heal, a reminder that life in this time was fleeting and brutal, but it also ignited a resolve I could not ignore, a determination to face the dangers of the swamp with more than instinct, with more than despair, knowing that the survival of my tribe and the memory of those we lost depended on understanding, anticipating, and ultimately confronting the power that ruled the river. The nights became longer, the mist thicker, the sounds of distant destruction constant companions, and I realized that every step, every careful movement, every silent observation could be the difference between life and death, that the jungle, the swamp, and the serpent would not wait for us to be ready, and that only by embracing courage, intelligence, and relentless determination could we hope to survive. My grief mingled with fear and anger, forming a new resolve, a burning focus that consumed everything else, and I knew that in order to endure in this world, in order to prevent further loss, I would have to grow stronger, faster, smarter, and bolder than ever before, to confront Titanoboa not with blind fury, but with a mind sharpened by terror and a heart fueled by the memory of my brother, so that the next time the serpent rose, we would not be powerless, and perhaps, just perhaps, we might claim a fragment of the world it had dominated for so long. The loss of my brother left a fire burning inside me, one that fear could no longer touch, and I swore in the deepest corner of my heart that I would end Titanoboa, that I would confront the creature that had stolen not only him, but the fragile sense of safety our tribe clung to. The elders called me foolish, their voices trembling with a mix of anger and fear as they told me I was chasing death itself, that nothing alive could ever challenge something older than time. Their warnings fell on deaf ears because my grief had transformed into a force sharper than any spear, a rage hotter than the fires we carried, a determination that eclipsed all doubt. I spent days searching the swamp, studying every ripple, every coil, every movement of the river, learning the patterns of the monster that had haunted our nights, marking its favorite hunting grounds, the bends in the water it never avoided, and the silent ways it stalked even the largest prey. I gathered bones from fallen creatures, sharp fragments of stone and hardened wood, and began crafting a weapon that could pierce its scales, a spear that carried not only poison, but the concentrated weight of my sorrow and anger. I sharpened every edge meticulously, embedding intention into the shape, infusing it with the understanding I had gained of its strength and speed, knowing that only precision and patience could stand against such a force. For nights I trained in silence, throwing the spear at trees, testing angles, imagining Titanoboa's massive body writhing and twisting, feeling in my mind how it would respond, how it would move, how it would fight against a determined human. The tribe watched in apprehension, offering small words of encouragement but mostly retreating to their fear, unable to understand the obsession that had consumed me. They were right in one way. It was older than time, it was unstoppable. But I had realized that survival was never enough, that to reclaim even a sliver of control, I had to transform my grief into action, my terror into strategy, and my fury into an unyielding weapon. Then came the night of the blood moon, when the sky turned red, and the light fell over the swamp like a warning from the gods themselves. The air was thick and metallic, charged with electricity that made every hair on my body stand upright, and the mist that hovered over the river seemed to thicken unnaturally, curling like smoke around the trees. I approached the water quietly, the spear in my hands feeling impossibly heavy, yet also alive with purpose. Every instinct screamed that it was near, that it had been waiting, perhaps aware of my plans, yet I could not retreat. Then I saw it, rising from the water with the same terrifying grace that had haunted my dreams, its massive coils sliding effortlessly over the reeds, its eyes glowing like molten amber, measuring, calculating, asserting dominance as it always did. The ground trembled beneath its weight, and for a moment I froze, captivated and horrified, feeling the full magnitude of its power. I remembered the screams, the broken bones, the red waters, and I let the fury I had nurtured surge through me. I crouched, aiming carefully, the poisoned spear trembling in my grip, every muscle in my body taut, every breath controlled, every heartbeat in sync with the rhythm of the predator before me. Titanoboa moved closer, its head rising, nostrils flaring, tongue flicking like a whisper across the water, and I knew there would be no second chance. I hurled the spear with every ounce of strength, my vision locked on the glowing eyes, and the weapon struck with a hiss as poison met scale. And for the first time I saw a flicker of reaction, a slight hesitation in the rhythm of the unstoppable, an acknowledgement that perhaps this human was more than prey, that this creature of legend had met something dangerous in determination alone. The swamp erupted around us, water splashing violently as the beast lashed out. Coiling, striking, yet I was ready. Moving, dodging, striking again. A dance of survival and revenge. A confrontation between ancient power and human will that seemed suspended in time. Every motion carried the weight of grief and courage. Every sound amplified by the tension of life and death, until the water stilled. And for the first time, I glimpsed the possibility that even the oldest, most terrifying force in this world could be challenged. My heart pounded as I withdrew slightly, eyes never leaving the amber fire that had haunted me for so long, knowing this battle was only the beginning, that survival alone was no longer enough, that revenge had become a responsibility, a test of every skill, every instinct, every ounce of courage I possessed, and that if I survived this night, the swamp would remember the human who dared to defy the monster older than time, and that perhaps, just perhaps, Titanoboa would never underestimate us again. The swamp was alive with chaos, water churning violently as Titanoboa's massive coils sent waves crashing over the reeds, splintering trees under its weight and shaking the earth with each deliberate motion. And I stood at the edge, torch in hand, my heart hammering in my chest, knowing that this moment was the culmination of every fear, every loss, and every ounce of determination I had carried since my brother's death. I hurled the torch with all my strength, flames dancing across the water, casting flickering shadows on the twisted roots and reeds, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed suspended in firelight, the air thick with smoke, heat, and the metallic tang of water mixed with mud. The beast's head whipped toward the light, amber eyes locking on mine, and it lunged, coils wrapping around a tree with a force that splintered the trunk as if it were nothing more than straw, the roar that followed reverberating through the swamp, shaking the very air and vibrating through my bones. I ran, spear raised, lunging to strike its neck, the point piercing the thick scaled hide once, then again. But with a sudden violent twist, the spear shattered, shards flying into the water, my hands stinging from the force, my vision blurring with adrenaline and fear. Titanoboa recoiled slightly, its hiss vibrating through the mist, and I could feel the pulse of its strength. A rhythm older than the world itself, a power I could barely comprehend, and yet in that moment my resolve crystallized, rage and grief fusing into a single, unyielding determination to survive, to fight, to make it pay for every life it had claimed. I darted, dodging a lash of its tail that flattened reeds and water alike, narrowly avoiding crushing blows, each movement measured, calculated, a dance between instinct and terror, knowing that one misstep would be the end of me. The flames from the torch flickered dangerously low, and I grabbed another, tossing it toward the serpent, the fire hissing against its scales, smoke curling into the night sky, and for a moment I saw hesitation, a flicker of acknowledgement in its ancient, calculating gaze, but the pause was brief, and the swamp erupted again as it lunged, crushing another tree beneath its coils, sending splinters flying, water surging violently around us. I struck at its neck once more, the poison-coated spear meeting scale, and again I pushed with all my strength, but the creature responded with a roar so loud it seemed to shake the stars, a deep guttural sound that reverberated through the mist, echoing off distant cliffs and making every leaf and branch vibrate, a roar that carried the weight of centuries and the warning of unstoppable power. I stumbled back, breath heaving, heart racing, adrenaline scorching through my veins, and for a moment I thought it was over, that my courage might have been enough to claim a victory, that my grief and determination had forged a weapon that could pierce the armor of legend itself. But the beast shifted, coils tightening around a massive branch, pulling with incredible force, water and debris flying, and I realized the fight was far from finished. My hands were raw, my muscles screaming in protest, yet I refused to yield, circling, striking, dodging, and throwing torches into the water to confuse and distract, every moment a test of wits, courage, and resilience, every heartbeat a measure of life against an adversary that seemed incapable of defeat. The air was thick with the smell of burning wood, wet mud, and fear, my clothes soaked, my skin slick with sweat, yet I pressed on, knowing that hesitation would mean death, that the swamp, the night, and this ancient predator would not wait for me to falter. I felt the weight of every life lost, every scream, every memory of my brother fueling my strength, sharpening my focus, and compelling me to continue even as exhaustion threatened to consume me. The beast coiled higher, its head swinging with terrifying speed, eyes blazing like molten gold, and I ducked, rolled, lunged, each movement precise, each strike calculated, knowing that I could not allow panic to rule my mind, that the swamp and its ruler would only exploit weakness. And in that endless night, under the flickering firelight. Amidst the boiling water and crashing trees, I realized that the battle was not merely for survival. It was a confrontation between human will and ancient dominance, between loss and vengeance. And as I raised a new spear, gripping it tightly, feeling every tremor of the swamp beneath my feet, I understood that this was the moment that would define my life, my courage and my destiny, for no matter the roar, the coils, or the sheer power that surged before me, I had resolved that I would not break, I would not yield, and I would face Titanoboa until either it fell or I joined the countless others claimed by the swamp. And with that unwavering determination, I lunged forward once more, every muscle, every thought, every heartbeat focused on the impossible task of standing against a monster older than time itself, the night alive with fire, water, and fury, and the swamp bearing witness to a human who refused to surrender. The swamp erupted into chaos as the struggle reached a crescendo, the water boiling violently, fire hissing against the reeds, and for a moment I thought I understood the battle, that the Titanoboa's roar and fury were all that nature had to throw against me. But then the ground trembled beneath my feet, a deep, rumbling shift that felt older than anything I had ever known, and cracks began to split the earth in jagged, violent lines, swallowing roots, trees, and water alike as the swamp itself seemed to revolt against our intrusion. Flames spread faster than I could anticipate, leaping across dry reeds and fallen timber, smoke curling in thick, suffocating clouds. And I realized the fire I had used as a weapon had become part of the uncontrollable force that was reshaping the landscape. Titanoboa writhed violently, coils thrashing against the mud and water as the earth beneath it gave way, and in one impossible, horrifying moment it disappeared, sinking beneath the thick, oozing mud that swallowed everything in its path, leaving only ripples and steam rising into the blood-red sky of the dying moon. My heart pounded with relief and disbelief, and I felt the temptation to think we had won, that the fury of the swamp had finally claimed the ancient predator. Yet even as my hands trembled and I leaned heavily on the shattered remnants of my spear, I knew better. Something in the air, in the shifting mud, in the way the trees bent unnaturally and the water boiled and hissed, whispered a truth far more terrifying than any monster alone could deliver. Nature itself was alive. It did not forgive, and it did not die. It evolved. The swamp was transforming, rebirthing under the twin powers of fire and earth, and I felt a shiver of fear mixed with awe as the realization struck me that Titanoboa's disappearance was not an end, but a metamorphosis, that the predator we had known and feared was not gone but hidden, adapting, integrating with the swamp in ways beyond my understanding, and that whatever emerged would be more formidable, more cunning, more attuned to the primal force of life itself than any creature we had ever faced. I stumbled back, mud clinging to my skin, smoke stinging my eyes, every sense overwhelmed by the roar of shifting earth and snapping timber, and I knew that survival meant more than strength, more than courage. It required understanding, anticipation, and respect for the raw, evolutionary force that had just claimed its victory in a way I could neither fight nor fully comprehend. The fires spread unchecked, consuming underbrush, scorching reeds, and twisting trees into grotesque forms, and as I looked at the landscape, I realized that the swamp itself had become a weapon, a living entity shaped by millennia of power and predation, and Titanoboa had become an extension of it, melting into the mud, its coils disappearing but its presence insinuating itself into every ripple, every gust of smoke, every tremor of the shaking ground. My tribe watched in terror, faces pale, eyes wide with the knowledge that the world we had known was gone, replaced by something far older and more merciless, and I felt the weight of responsibility settle over me like a second skin, understanding that we had survived not because we were stronger, but because we had glimpsed the limits of power and lived, and that we could not assume such fortune would repeat itself. The swamp hissed and shifted, swallowing fire, water, and life alike, and I understood that whatever had happened to Titanoboa would not be the end of terror, but the beginning of a new reign. One where intelligence, patience, and adaptability were far deadlier than raw strength. I crouched, exhausted, mud and ash coating my body, yet my mind was sharp, eyes scanning the boiling water, searching for any sign of the predator or its essence, knowing that this battle had changed everything. The world itself had reminded me that life was not static, that death was not absolute, and that survival depended on learning the rhythms of the land as much as the movements of any predator. Flames licked higher, smoke obscured vision, and the ground groaned and sank, carrying away trees, debris, and the remnants of our struggle. And I realized that what we had witnessed was not merely a confrontation between human and beast, but a demonstration of the unstoppable, evolving force that nature wielded, a force that would not be constrained by fear, by rage, or by the will of mortals. Titanoboa may have disappeared beneath the mud, but the swamp had taken it, and I knew with certainty that the creature's return would be unlike anything we had faced. Molded by fire and earth, smarter, deadlier, and perfectly in tune with the ever-changing rhythm of the land. My knees ached, my chest heaved, but my resolve solidified in that moment of terrifying clarity. We had survived. Yes, but the lesson was absolute. Nature does not die. It evolves, and whatever emerged from the mud would not forgive, would not forget, and would demand that we, and all who dared enter its domain, understand that the true power of the world lies not in our weapons or courage alone, but in recognizing the ancient, relentless, and ever-changing force that rules all life. Years passed, and my people moved north, leaving the swamp and its horrors behind, but the memories never faded. The jungles we knew turned to plains, the rivers shifted, and the skies changed. Yet sometimes when thunder rolls across the distant mountains or rivers rise with sudden fury, I still feel it, the deep, resonant rumble beneath the earth that no human could tame. I have long wondered if Titanoboa truly died or if it slumbered, waiting, its patience as endless as the centuries. Perhaps it still waits, watching, learning, ready for the next humans bold or foolish enough to challenge its dominion. I carry the memory of fire, blood, and vengeance in my bones, a legacy of survival and justice. And I know the truth now. The monster you fear is never gone. It merely sleeps beneath your world, a reminder that nature is eternal, ruthless, and always ready to reclaim what we dare to take.